Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
The phone buzzed at exactly 5:03 in the morning, jolting me awake in my childhood bedroom. I squinted at the screen through bleary eyes, expecting some emergency or wrong number. Instead, I found two text messages that would shatter my entire world in less than 60 seconds. The first came from Mom. "We used your savings to pay your brother's law school tuition. You'll replace it before January." Then Dad's follow-up landed like a punch to the gut. "You live here for free. Start acting useful." $43,000. 6 years of my life. Gone. I stared at the phone screen until the words burned into my retinas, my brain refusing to process what I just read. $43,217. Every penny I'd scraped together since turning 20, working 60-hour weeks at Thompson Electronics while my friends partied through college. Every skipped dinner, every canceled date, every time I'd chosen ramen noodles over a decent meal. My hands trembled as I opened my banking app, praying this was some cruel joke. The screen loaded slowly, each second stretching into eternity. Account balance $437. My savings account, the one I'd been feeding religiously for 6 years, showed a withdrawal dated yesterday afternoon. $42,780. Electronic transfer, authorized by account holder. But I hadn't authorized anything. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the faded Superman poster I'd never bothered taking down and felt something inside me break. Not just disappointment or anger, but something deeper. Trust, maybe. The foundation of everything I'd believed about family, about fairness, about working hard and saving for your dreams. My phone buzzed again. Jake, my 24-year-old brother, the golden child, who'd sailed through his undergraduate degree at Yale, while I worked retail to help pay his expenses. "Thanks, bro. This means everything. I'll pay you back after I graduate and land a big firm job, promise." The casual tone, the exclamation points the assumption that I'd just roll over and accept this theft. Because that's what it was, wasn't it? Theft. They'd taken my money without asking, without discussing it, without even having the decency to wake me up and explain. I walked to my desk, a cheap particle board thing I'd bought at a garage sale when I was 19. Sitting on top was a manila folder I'd been hoping I'd never have to use. Inside were bank statements, printed emails, and handwritten notes. Documentation of every suspicious transaction every time my parents had asked for my account information for tax purposes, every instance where money had mysteriously moved without my knowledge. Because this wasn't the first time. Opening the folder, I found the evidence I'd been collecting for 2 years. Small withdrawals, at first $50 here, $100 there. Always with explanations: emergency car repair, or your grandmother needed medication, or we'll put it back next week. But they never did put it back. The withdrawals had grown larger and more frequent, and I'd started keeping track. The earliest suspicious transaction was from 18 months ago. $2,000 withdrawn on a Tuesday afternoon while I was at work. When I'd asked about it, Mom had claimed it was for Jake's textbooks. $1,500 for textbooks seemed excessive, but I'd trusted her. Trust. That word felt poisonous now. I flipped through page after page of evidence. Credit card statements showing charges I'd never made. Loan applications with my social security number that I'd never signed. Bank records showing transfers between accounts I didn't know existed. They'd been stealing from me systematically, and I'd been too naive, too trusting, too desperate to believe in family loyalty to see it clearly. My phone rang. Dad's contact photo, a picture from last Christmas, where he was smiling and holding up a beer. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. "Perry, we need to talk. Come downstairs when you get this, and bring that attitude in check. We're family, and family helps each other. Your brother's future depends on this education, and you're being selfish. Call me back." Selfish. I was selfish for wanting to keep the money I'd earned, saved, and sacrificed for. Jake's future was more important than mine because he was the smart one, the one with potential, the one who'd never worked a day in retail or food service. I'd been planning for graduate school myself, maybe an MBA or a master's in computer science. Those dreams felt laughably naive now sitting here at 5:30 in the morning with my bank account emptied and my family treating me like an ATM. But as I sat there holding the folder of evidence I'd compiled, something shifted inside me. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something colder and more focused. They thought they could steal from me, and I'd just accept it. They thought I was weak compliant, the family doormat who'd always go along to get along. They were about to learn how wrong they were. By 6:15, I had 3 suitcases packed with everything that mattered: clothes, electronics, important documents, and that manila folder. I moved quietly through the house, careful not to wake my parents. They probably thought they'd dropped their bombshell and could sleep peacefully while I processed their betrayal. I made 2 trips to my Honda Civic, loading everything into the trunk and back seat. The car was 8 years old with 160,000 miles on it, but it was mine. Paid for with money I'd earned, titled in my name alone. They couldn't take this from me. Before leaving, I walked back into the kitchen and placed a photocopy of the folder's contents on the breakfast table, where they'd see it immediately. Every bank statement, every fraudulent transaction, every piece of evidence I'd gathered. The cover page was a handwritten note. Since we're discussing what's fair, let's be completely honest about where the money's really been going. I drove across town to Riverside Apartments where my friend Marcus lived. We'd known each other since high school, and he was one of the few people who'd never judged me for living at home or working retail, while my classmates pursued careers. Marcus worked as a paralegal at a small law firm and understood how the world really worked. I knocked on his door just after 7, knowing he'd be awake preparing for work. He opened it, wearing a dress shirt and tie, coffee mug in hand, looking confused to see me standing there with luggage. "Perry, what's going on, man?" "My family just stole $43,000 from me. Can I crash on your couch while I figure out what to do next?" Marcus stepped aside immediately, gesturing me into his small but tidy apartment. "Come in, tell me everything." I sat at his kitchen table and explained the morning's events, showing him the text messages and bank statements. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. "This isn't just family drama," he said when I finished. "This is fraud, identity theft, probably several felonies depending on how they accessed your account." "I know," I said, opening the manila folder. "That's why I've been documenting everything." Marcus's eyes widened as he examined the evidence. Bank statements going back 2 years showing a pattern of unauthorized withdrawals. Printed emails where my parents had requested my account information under false pretenses. Photos of documents I'd found in my father's desk, including copies of my social security card and driver's license. "Perry, this is gold. You've been building a case without even realizing it. Look at this." He pointed to a bank statement from 14 months ago. "This withdrawal happened on a day when you were working right, I remember, because you couldn't come to my birthday party." I nodded. "I worked a double shift that Saturday. I was at the store from 8 in the morning until midnight. So there's no way you could have authorized this in person. And look at the transaction details. It was processed at a branch downtown, nowhere near your workplace. But your parents live 15 minutes from that branch." Marcus pulled out his laptop and started taking notes. "We need to document everything. Times, dates, your work schedule, their movements. If they've been doing this systematically, there's going to be a paper trail that proves premeditation." My phone started ringing. Mom's ringtone, a gentle chime I'd chosen because I'd wanted to think of her as the caring, nurturing parent. Now it sounded like an alarm warning me of danger. I showed Marcus the screen. 7th call in the past hour. "Don't answer yet. Let's get everything organized first. If this is going where I think it's going, every conversation from now on needs to be documented." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Mom's freaking out about some papers you left. What's your problem? We're family. Just replace the money like they said, and stop being dramatic. Marcus read over my shoulder and shook his head. Your brother's in on it. That text proves he knew the money was taken without your permission, and he's okay with it. Save that. Screenshot everything. I felt a new wave of betrayal wash over me. Jake wasn't just the beneficiary of the theft. He was an active participant. The little brother I'd helped with homework driven to soccer practice and covered for when he'd gotten in trouble. He'd known they were stealing from me and hadn't cared. There's something else, I said, scrolling through my phone. Look at this message thread from 3 weeks ago. I showed Marcus a conversation where Jake had asked me about my college fund and whether I was planning to use it anytime soon. At the time, I'd thought he was just making conversation. Now I realized he'd been gathering intelligence for the heist. They've been planning this for weeks, maybe months, Marcus said. This wasn't a desperate last-minute decision. This was calculated, premeditated theft. My phone rang again. This time it was Dad, and I could see the anger in his contact photo. Marcus nodded toward the phone. Answer it, but put it on speaker. We need to hear what he says. I swiped to accept the call, my heart pounding. Where the hell are you? Dad's voice boomed through the speaker. Get home right now. We need to discuss this like adults. I'm not coming home, I said calmly. We can discuss this through lawyers if necessary. Lawyers, are you out of your mind? We're your parents. We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head. You owe us everything you have. I owe you gratitude for raising me. I don't owe you $43,000. That money is going toward your brother's education. It's an investment in the family's future. You're being selfish and short-sighted. Marcus was frantically taking notes, capturing Dad's exact words, admitting they took the money, justifying it as an entitlement based on being my parents. Did you ask my permission before taking it? I asked. We don't need your permission. You're our son. What's ours is ours, and what's yours is ours too. That's how families work. Then we have very different definitions of family, I said and ended the call. Marcus looked up from his notes, shaking his head in amazement. He just confessed to theft on a recorded call, in front of a witness. They really think they're entitled to everything you've earned. My phone immediately buzzed with a text from Mom. If you don't come home and apologize to your father right now, you're no longer welcome in this family. I showed the message to Marcus, who whistled low. They're panicking. Good. Panic makes people sloppy, and they're already being pretty sloppy. What do I do now? I asked. Marcus closed his laptop and looked at me seriously. Now we call the police. At Marcus's dining table, surrounded by evidence that painted a damning picture of systematic financial abuse, I realized the theft was far more sophisticated than I'd initially understood. Marcus had spread out 2 years' worth of bank statements in chronological order, and the pattern was unmistakable. Look at this progression, Marcus said, pointing to highlighted entries. They started small. $50 here, $100 there. Testing to see if you'd notice. When you didn't raise a fuss, they got bolder. The early withdrawals had been scattered irregular. But starting about 8 months ago, they'd developed a rhythm. Every few weeks, like clockwork. Always on days when I was working long shifts, always from branches I never visited. Here's what really concerns me. Marcus continued pulling out a credit report he'd helped me request online. Look at these accounts you never opened. 3 credit cards. A personal loan. A line of credit tied to what appeared to be a business I'd never started. All opened using my social security number, all with my parents listed as authorized users. The total debt they've racked up in your name is over $87,000, Marcus said. The cash they stole from your savings is just the tip of the iceberg. I felt physically sick. How is this possible? Don't they need my signature for this stuff? They should, but if they have access to your personal information, and if they're good at forging signatures, Marcus trailed off, pulling out another document. Look at this loan application. Does this signature look like yours? It was close. Uncomfortably close. Someone had practiced copying my handwriting, studying the way I formed letters, the pressure I applied, the spacing between words. My phone rang again. Jake this time. I answered immediately and put it on speaker. Perry, what's this garbage Mom found on the kitchen table? Are you seriously going to make a big deal out of this? It's just money. I'll pay you back when I'm a lawyer. When exactly will that be, Jake? And how much interest are you planning to pay on an $87,000 loan? $87,000? What are you talking about? They only took 43. Marcus and I exchanged glances. Jake genuinely didn't know the full scope of what our parents had done. Check your bank statements, Jake. Look at where your tuition payments have been coming from for the past 2 years. It hasn't just been this one transfer. There was a long pause. I could hear typing in the background, probably Jake logging into his student account. That's not possible. Mom said they'd been saving for my education. They saved by stealing from me systematically for 2 years, I said. And they used my identity to open credit accounts to cover the rest. I'm looking at loans I never signed for, credit cards I never applied for, debt that's going to destroy my credit rating. Perry, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it was this bad. I thought they just used your savings account for this semester's tuition. But you knew they were using my savings without asking. Another pause. Yeah, but they said you'd agreed to it. They said you were helping me out as a graduation gift. When did I agree to that, Jake? When did we have that conversation? Silence on the other end. Jake was realizing he'd been lied to as well, manipulated into being complicit in a crime he hadn't fully understood. What are you going to do? He asked quietly. I'm going to file a police report for identity theft and fraud. I'm going to contact every creditor they've opened accounts with and dispute the charges. And I'm going to make sure they face consequences for what they've done. Perry, they're our parents. Our parents are criminals, Jake. And if you knowingly benefited from money they stole, you might be an accessory. I ended the call and looked at Marcus, who was nodding approvingly. Good. You're making them face reality. No more family loyalty protecting them from the consequences of their actions. My phone immediately lit up with texts. Mom, how dare you threaten your own brother? Dad, you're destroying this family over money. Jake, please don't do this. Let's work it out privately. They want to work it out privately because they know they're guilty, Marcus said. If this was legitimate, they'd be happy to involve outside parties to mediate. The fact that they're panicking about police involvement tells you everything you need to know. Marcus pulled up the website for the local police department. Identity theft is a federal crime. Bank fraud is a federal crime. The dollar amounts involved make this a felony case. These aren't small-time mistakes. These are serious criminal offenses. As we prepared to leave for the police station, my phone rang one more time. Unknown number, local area code. Hello. Is this Perry Jameson? A woman's voice, professional and unfamiliar. Yes, who's calling? This is Detective Sarah Chen with the Montgomery County Financial Crimes Unit. We've received a complaint regarding potential identity theft and fraud involving your accounts. Would you be available to speak with us this afternoon? I looked at Marcus, confused. I haven't filed a complaint yet. We were just heading to the station to do that. The complaint didn't come from you, Mr. Jameson. It came from your bank. When large-scale identity theft patterns are detected, financial institutions are required to report them to law enforcement. Based on the activity in your accounts, this investigation has been ongoing for several weeks. Marcus grabbed my arm, his eyes wide. They've been watching your parents, he whispered. Detective Chen, I have extensive documentation of fraudulent activity involving my accounts. When can we meet? Would 2 o'clock this afternoon work for you and Mr. Jameson? Don't contact any of the involved parties until we've spoken. This investigation involves multiple potential victims, and we don't want to compromise our ability to gather evidence. Multiple victims. My parents hadn't just been stealing from me. They'd been running a broader operation, and I was just one target among many. After hanging up, I sat in Marcus's living room trying to process what was happening. In less than 12 hours, my understanding of my family had been completely shattered. Not only had they been stealing from me, but they were apparently part of a financial crime operation large enough to attract federal attention. Marcus, what if I'm not the only family member they've been stealing from? He nodded grimly. That's probably exactly what the detective is going to tell you. Your parents have likely been systematically defrauding multiple relatives, and you were just the biggest target because you had the most accessible savings. My phone buzzed with another text from Mom. The police just called us. How could you involve strangers in family business? We raised you better than this. Come home immediately, and we'll fix this together. But there was nothing to fix. The damage was done, the crimes were committed, and the investigation was already underway. My parents had destroyed their own family with their greed and entitlement, and now they were facing the consequences they'd never thought would come. The golden child narrative, the family hierarchy, the expectation that I'd always be the compliant son who sacrificed for everyone else's benefit, all of it was crumbling. And for the first time since reading those text messages at 5 in the morning, I felt something other than betrayal and anger. I felt free. Detective Chen's office was located in a sterile government building that smelled like disinfectant and disappointment. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog every detail as she reviewed my folder of evidence. You saw Mr. Jameson? I have to say this is some of the most thorough documentation I've seen from a victim. Most people don't realize they're being systematically defrauded until it's too late to gather this kind of evidence. I knew something was wrong, I said. I just didn't know how wrong until this morning. Detective Chen spread my bank statements across her desk alongside what appeared to be a much thicker file. What we're about to discuss cannot leave this room until the investigation is complete. Do you understand? I nodded. Your parents have been running what we call a family fraud ring for at least 3 years. They've systematically stolen from multiple relatives using similar tactics. Identity theft, forged signatures, unauthorized access to accounts. The total amount we've identified so far exceeds $200,000. $200,000. I felt dizzy. Who else? I asked. Your grandmother, Eleanor Jameson. Your Uncle Tom and his wife, Susan. Your cousin, Rachel. All of them elderly or trusting family members who gave your parents access to their personal information for supposedly legitimate purposes. Detective Chen pulled out a timeline that looked like a military operation. They've been very systematic. They target family members who have savings, but aren't financially sophisticated. They gain access through legitimate requests, like helping with taxes or setting up online banking. Then they gradually escalate the theft. How much did they steal from my grandmother? $47,000 over 2 years. Her Social Security payments were being redirected to an account your mother controlled. Your grandmother has been living on about $300 a month, while your mother told the family she was doing fine financially. I thought about the last time I'd seen Grandma Eleanor. She'd seemed thinner, her clothes a bit shabby, but she'd insisted everything was wonderful when I'd asked if she needed anything. I'd offered to help with groceries or bills, but she'd waved me off saying my parents were taking excellent care of her. They'd been stealing her Social Security while letting her live in poverty. Mr. Jameson, there's something else. We believe your parents were planning to escalate their operation significantly. Detective Chen showed me documents I'd never seen before. Mortgage applications, business loan paperwork, all bearing forged versions of my signature. They were in the process of securing a second mortgage on the family home using your income as collateral. They'd also applied for a business loan to start a consulting company with you listed as the primary borrower. If these applications had been approved, you would have been responsible for over $300,000 in debt you never agreed to. Why target me specifically for the larger amounts? You had the best credit score and the most stable employment history among their potential victims. They'd been grooming you as their primary source for major fraud. The theft of your savings was probably just a test run for much bigger schemes. My phone had been buzzing constantly during our conversation. Text after text from my parents and Jake, growing increasingly frantic as they realized I wasn't responding. Detective Chen noticed. "May I see those messages?" I handed over my phone and she scrolled through the increasingly desperate communication attempts. "These are excellent evidence of consciousness of guilt," she said. "They know they've committed crimes and they're panicking about being caught. This level of desperation often means they're destroying evidence right now. What happens next? We execute search warrants on their home and vehicles this afternoon. We'll seize all financial documents, computers, and phones. Based on the evidence you've provided and what we've already gathered, we expect to file federal charges within the week." Federal charges: wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud. These are serious felonies carrying significant prison time, especially given the systematic nature of the operation and the amounts involved. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang. Dad's number. "Answer it," Detective Chen said. "But put it on speaker. I want to hear what he says." I accepted the call with trembling hands. "Perry, son, we need to work this out. Come home right now. Your mother's having a breakdown over this misunderstanding." "It's not a misunderstanding, Dad. It's systematic theft." "Don't be dramatic. We borrowed some money to help your brother succeed. Family helps family. You'll get it back when Jake starts earning lawyer money." "What about the credit cards you opened in my name? What about the loans you applied for using my information?" A long pause. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The business loan for $200,000? The second mortgage application, all signed with my forged signature." "Perry, you're confused. You've always been the anxious type imagining problems that don't exist. Come home and we'll clear this up." Detective Chen was taking notes, recording everything. "What about Grandma Eleanor's Social Security checks? Your grandmother asked us to help manage her finances. She's getting older, not as sharp as she used to be. We've been protecting her from making bad decisions with her money. By stealing it, we haven't stolen anything. We've been managing family resources efficiently. Your grandmother gets everything she needs." $300 a month is everything she needs. Another pause, longer this time. "I don't know where you're getting these numbers, Perry. Your grandmother is comfortable and well cared for." Detective Chen gestured for me to keep him talking. "Dad, the police have been investigating you for months. They know about all of it. Every forged signature, every stolen dollar, every family member you've defrauded." "The police, Perry? How could you bring strangers into family business? We raised you better than this. Whatever problems we have, we solve them together as a family." "Criminals aren't family," I said. "They're criminals." I hung up and looked at Detective Chen, who was smiling grimly. "That was perfect. He admitted to managing your grandmother's finances without authorization and acknowledged taking family money without permission. In legal terms, that's confession to theft and elder abuse." My phone immediately erupted with calls and texts. "Jake, the police are at the house. What did you do, Mom? How could you destroy your own family? Dad, this is unforgivable. You're no longer my son. Mr. Jameson, I need to prepare you for what's about to happen. Your parents will likely be arrested within the next few hours. Your brother may also face charges depending on how much he knew about the sources of his tuition payments. This is going to get very public very quickly." I thought about Jake sitting in his law school apartment watching his dreams crumble as he realized his education had been financed through theft. Part of me felt sorry for him, but another part remembered his casual dismissal of my concerns, his assumption that I'd just accept being robbed for his benefit. "What about the money they've stolen? Can it be recovered?" "Much of it, yes. We've frozen all accounts connected to your parents, and we're working with banks to reverse fraudulent transactions. The victims will eventually recover most of their losses, though it may take time." Detective Chen handed me a business card. You'll need to stay available for the next few weeks as this investigation develops. And Mr. Jameson, you should be proud of yourself. Your documentation and willingness to come forward will help us recover stolen money from multiple victims. Your courage is going to help a lot of people. As I left the police station, my phone rang one final time. An unknown number. Hello, Perry, this is your Grandma Eleanor. I just wanted to call and tell you how proud I am of you for standing up to those thieves. I've been living on crackers and peanut butter for months while they stole my Social Security. Thank you for giving me my life back. Her voice was stronger than I'd heard it in years, filled with relief and gratitude. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I'd done something unequivocally right. The family I'd grown up in was destroyed, but maybe something better could be built from its ruins. The local news trucks arrived at my parents' house just after 3 in the afternoon. Marcus and I watched the coverage from his apartment, seeing aerial footage of police vehicles surrounding the modest 2-story home where I'd grown up. The reporter spoke in measured tones about a significant financial fraud investigation involving multiple victims and systematic identity theft. My phone rang constantly, but I'd stopped answering calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Word was spreading through our extended family network, and everyone wanted details I wasn't authorized to provide. Detective Chen called around 4:30. We've executed the search warrants. Your parents have been arrested and charged with multiple federal felonies. They're being held without bail pending arraignment. What about Jake? Your brother is currently being questioned. His level of involvement will determine whether charges are filed against him. The evidence suggests he knew the money was taken without authorization, but we're still determining if that rises to the level of criminal conspiracy. That evening, my Uncle Tom called. I'd always liked Tom. He was my father's older brother, a retired electrician, who'd worked hard his entire life and saved carefully for retirement. Perry, I owe you an apology, he said. And a thank you. Susan and I had no idea how much money they'd stolen from us until the police showed us the account records today. How much? $38,000 over 18 months. They convinced us to let them help manage our retirement funds, said they'd found better investment opportunities. We trusted them because they're family. Uncle Tom's voice cracked slightly. We've been living like we're broke for over a year, cutting back on everything, worried we didn't save enough for retirement. The whole time your parents were stealing our nest egg and letting us suffer. By evening, I'd received similar calls from 3 other relatives. Cousin Rachel, who'd lost $22,000 after letting my parents help with her divorce settlement. Great Aunt Margaret, who'd had her savings depleted, while my mother claimed to be investing it safely. Even my father's business partner, Frank, who'd discovered that my parents had been embezzling from their shared consulting firm. The scope of the operation was staggering. Over 15 victims spanning 3 generations of family and close friends. My parents had systematically exploited every relationship they had, using trust and family obligation as weapons to steal from people who loved them. Jake called around 9, his voice hollow with defeat. They're expelling me from law school, he said without preamble. Effective immediately. They said accepting tuition payments from criminal activity violates the honor code. I'm sorry, Jake, I really am. No, you're not. You're probably happy that your perfect little brother is finally getting what he deserves. That's not true. I never wanted you to get hurt. I wanted our parents to stop being criminals. They're not criminals, Perry. They made some bad decisions, but they were trying to help the family succeed. You've destroyed everything because you couldn't see the bigger picture. I felt a familiar surge of anger. Even now, facing the collapse of his dreams, Jake still couldn't accept that our parents were thieves. Jake, they stole over $200,000 from our own family members. They left Grandma Eleanor living on $300 a month while they stole her Social Security. They forged my signature on loan applications that would have left me with hundreds of thousands in debt I never agreed to. Those aren't bad decisions. Those are felonies. You could have handled this privately. You could have demanded the money back and let them fix it quietly. Instead, you went nuclear and involved the police. They've been stealing for 3 years, Jake. This wasn't one mistake. It was a criminal enterprise. How exactly was I supposed to handle it privately when they'd already proven they're willing to commit fraud on a massive scale? You've sent our parents to prison. Do you understand that they're going to spend years in federal custody because you couldn't forgive a family loan? They sent themselves to prison by choosing to be criminals. I just refuse to be their victim anymore. Jake hung up without another word. An hour later, he sent a text. I hope you're happy. The family has destroyed Mom's in the hospital under suicide watch and Dad's talking about pleading guilty to avoid a longer sentence. You got your revenge. I showed the message to Marcus, who shook his head in disgust. He's still trying to make you the villain. Even after everything that's come out, he can't accept that your parents are criminals and you're a victim. Maybe I should have tried to work it out privately first, I said. Harry, they were actively applying for loans in your name worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you hadn't acted when you did, you'd be facing bankruptcy and ruined credit for the rest of your life. They weren't going to stop stealing. They were going to escalate until they destroyed you completely. That night, I lay on Marcus's couch staring at the ceiling and trying to process the complete collapse of my family. In less than 48 hours, both parents had been arrested, my brother had been expelled from law school, and our extended family had discovered they'd been systematically defrauded for years. The house I'd grown up in was now a crime scene wrapped in yellow tape and being searched by federal agents. The family photos on the mantle, the Christmas decorations still packed away in the attic, the dinner table where we'd shared thousands of meals, all of it was tainted now by the knowledge of what my parents had been doing behind closed doors. But as I lay there in the darkness, I realized something unexpected. For the first time in years, I felt safe. The constant low-level anxiety, I'd lived with the nagging sense that something was wrong. The feeling of being exploited and unvalued, all of it had lifted. I was 26 years old, starting over with nothing but a Honda Civic and the clothes I'd packed in 3 suitcases. But I was free from people who saw me as nothing more than a resource to exploit. Maybe that was worth the price I'd paid to get here. 6 months later, I sat in a federal courtroom watching my parents accept a plea bargain that would send them to prison for 4 and 6 years respectively. Mom got the shorter sentence in exchange for cooperating with investigators and helping them recover stolen assets hidden in various accounts. Dad, who'd been the primary architect of the scheme, would serve the longer term. The restitution hearing had been particularly satisfying. Every victim testified about the impact of the theft, from Grandma Eleanor's months of malnutrition to Uncle Tom's anxiety about running out of retirement savings. The judge had been visibly angry as she listened to testimony about elder abuse and family betrayal. The defendants exploited the most sacred bonds of trust, Judge Martinez had said during sentencing. They weaponized family love to commit systematic fraud against people who would have helped them willingly, if asked honestly. This represents a particularly cruel form of theft that damages not just financial security, but fundamental human relationships. Jake had testified as a witness for the prosecution, finally accepting that he'd been manipulated into participating in criminal activity. His cooperation had kept him out of prison, but he'd still faced consequences. Expelled from law school, saddled with student loan debt for an education he couldn't complete, and facing a felony conviction for conspiracy that would prevent him from ever practicing law. The day after the sentencing, Jake and I met for coffee at a small shop near Marcus's apartment. He looked older, worn down by months of legal proceedings and the collapse of everything he'd planned for his life. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began quietly, "about how I couldn't see what they were really doing. You were right. I knew the money was taken without your permission, and I told myself it was okay, because we were family." "I appreciate you saying that," I said. "I'm moving to Oregon next month. Uncle Tom offered me a job with his electrical contracting business. It's not what I planned for my life, but it's honest work. And I need to start over somewhere that doesn't remind me of all this." Jake looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Genuine remorse stripped of the entitlement and casual disregard that had characterized our relationship for years. Perry, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that I understand now. You didn't destroy our family. You exposed what our parents had already destroyed. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that. It was the first real apology I'd ever received from my brother, and it meant more than I'd expected. The financial recovery had exceeded expectations. Between frozen accounts, seized assets, and liquidated property, victims had recovered almost 90% of their stolen money. I'd gotten back $41,000, Uncle Tom had recovered $36,000, and Grandma Eleanor's Social Security payments had been restored with back payments covering the entire period they'd been stolen. But the real transformation in my life had come from an unexpected source. During the investigation, I'd met several other fraud victims who weren't related to my family. People who'd been scammed by sophisticated operations, elderly individuals who'd lost their life savings, to criminals who exploited their trust and isolation. I'd started volunteering with a nonprofit organization that helped financial crime victims navigate the recovery process. My experience documenting fraud and working with law enforcement had made me unusually effective at helping other people gather evidence and pursue justice. Within 4 months, the nonprofit had offered me a full-time position as a victim advocate. The work paid well, felt meaningful, and used skills I'd developed through my own traumatic experience to help other people rebuild their lives. I'd also moved out of Marcus's apartment and into a small house I was renting with an option to buy. It wasn't much, a 2-bedroom bungalow built in the 1970s, but it was mine. No one could take it away from me, no one could steal from me while I slept, and no one could claim ownership over my earnings or savings. Grandma Eleanor had become a regular fixture in my new life. Once her finances were restored, she'd moved out of the senior living facility where my parents had warehoused her and into a nice apartment closer to downtown. We had dinner together twice a week, and she'd become something like my surrogate parent, offering the unconditional support and genuine care I'd never received from my biological parents. "You know what I'm proudest of?" she told me one evening as we shared pizza and watched old movies. "You didn't let them make you bitter. You turned your pain into purpose, and now you're helping other people who've been hurt the same way." She was right. The anger and betrayal I'd felt that morning 6 months ago had transformed into something more productive. Every victim I helped recover stolen money, every criminal I helped put in prison, every family I helped rebuild after financial abuse, it all felt like justice, not just for me, but for everyone who'd ever been exploited by people who were supposed to love them. My parents had written letters from prison asking for forgiveness and requesting visits. I'd read them, but hadn't responded. Maybe someday I'd be ready for that conversation, but not yet. They needed to serve their time, experience real consequences for their actions, and demonstrate genuine change before I'd consider rebuilding any kind of relationship. For now, I was focused on building a new life based on honesty, respect, and genuine mutual support. The family I'd been born into had been built on exploitation and manipulation. The family I was choosing to create would be different. As I sat in my small living room that evening, surrounded by thank you cards from fraud victims I'd helped and photos of the people who truly cared about me, I realized something profound had happened. The worst betrayal of my life had led me to discover my real purpose and my authentic community. Sometimes the most devastating losses create space for the most important gains. My parents had stolen my money, but they'd inadvertently given me something far more valuable, the knowledge of who I really was and what I was capable of when I refused to be a victim. 2 years after that devastating 5 a.m. text message, I stood in the lobby of my own office building, watching through the glass doors as my latest client walked toward her car with a satisfied smile. Margaret Stevens, 73 years old, had just learned that we'd recovered $84,000 that her nephew had stolen from her retirement fund. More importantly, he was going to prison for elder abuse, and she'd never have to fear his manipulation again. My business, Jameson Financial Recovery Services, had grown beyond anything I'd imagined possible. What started as volunteering had evolved into a full-service consultancy, helping fraud victims navigate the complex process of financial recovery and criminal prosecution. I employed 6 people now, including 2 former federal agents and a certified fraud examiner. The work was challenging and emotionally demanding, but deeply satisfying. Every case reminded me why I'd chosen this path. Every recovered dollar represented justice for people who'd been betrayed by those they trusted most. Grandma Eleanor had moved into the guest bedroom of my house the previous spring. At 82, she was still sharp and independent, but she enjoyed having family nearby, and I loved having her wisdom and company. She'd become my closest advisor both personally and professionally, offering insights that only came from 8 decades of watching people navigate life's complexities. "You've built something special here," she said that evening as we shared dinner on my back patio. "Your parents thought they were teaching you to be weak and compliant. Instead, they taught you to be strong and self-reliant." Jake had visited for the first time the previous month. He'd been working in Oregon for 18 months, learning electrical work and rebuilding his life one honest dollar at a time. The entitlement and casual cruelty that had characterized our relationship for years had been replaced by humility and genuine respect. "I want to show you something," he'd said during his visit, pulling out his phone to display a savings account balance. $12,400. "It's not much, but I earned every penny of it. I understand now what you meant about the dignity of honest work." He'd apologized again, more thoroughly this time, acknowledging not just his participation in the theft, but years of treating me as less valuable than himself. The conversation had been difficult, but necessary, and it had opened the possibility of rebuilding our relationship on more honest terms. "I know I can't undo the damage," he'd said, "but I want to be someone worthy of being your brother again. It would take time, but I was willing to try." My parents had been released from federal prison 3 months early for good behavior. They'd both written letters asking to meet, claiming they'd used their incarceration time for reflection and personal growth. I wasn't ready for that yet, but I hadn't ruled it out entirely. Forgiveness, I'd learned, didn't require reconciliation. I'd forgiven them in the sense of releasing my anger and resentment, but trust would need to be earned through consistent change behavior over time. If that day ever came, I'd be open to it. If it didn't, I'd be content with the boundaries I'd established. The evening news played in the background as Grandma Eleanor and I finished dinner. A story about a major corporate fraud case, hundreds of millions, stolen from pension funds, thousands of families affected. I watched with professional interest, automatically noting the investigative techniques and legal strategies being employed. "You're thinking about taking that case, aren't you?" Grandma Eleanor asked, reading my expression. "Maybe. Cases that big require months of work, but they also help thousands of people. It's exactly the kind of thing we started this business to handle." She smiled approvingly. "Your parents thought they were stealing your future when they took that money. Instead, they forced you to create a much better future than you'd ever planned. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the foundation for the best things we build." That night, as I reviewed case files in my home office, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The scared, confused young man who'd woken up to those devastating text messages bore little resemblance to the confident professional I'd become. The betrayal had hurt deeply, but it had also revealed strengths I'd never known I possessed. The systematic documentation I'd instinctively maintained had become the foundation for my career. The courage to stand up to family manipulation had developed into the backbone needed to confront powerful criminals and corrupt institutions. Most importantly, I'd learned that family wasn't defined by blood or obligation, but by genuine care and mutual respect. The people who truly loved me had supported my decision to pursue justice even when it was painful. The people who'd exploited me had revealed themselves through their reactions to accountability. Grandma Eleanor was family. Marcus was family. Uncle Tom and his wife Susan, who'd invited me to every holiday since the trial, were family. Jake was working to become family again through changed behavior and earned trust. The colleagues who fought alongside me for victims' rights were family. The biological relatives who'd seen me as nothing more than a resource to exploit. They were people I shared DNA with, nothing more. As I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Saw the story about that pension fund case on the news. You thinking about taking it? Already submitted our proposal to represent the victims, I texted back. Could be the biggest case we've ever handled. Perry Jameson Crusader for Justice. I'm proud of how far you've come, man. I smiled as I turned off the lights. 2 years ago, I'd been living in my childhood bedroom, slowly being drained of everything I'd worked for by people who claimed to love me. Tonight, I was living in my own house, running a successful business, and surrounded by people who respected me for who I really was. The journey from victim to advocate hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every difficult step. Before closing my laptop, I opened a new document and began typing. To anyone who might be reading this story and recognizing their own situation, you are not obligated to accept abuse because someone shares your last name or claims to love you. Real love respects boundaries, honest communication, and individual autonomy. If someone is stealing from you, manipulating you, or treating you as less than human, they are not acting out of love, regardless of what they claim. You have the right to protect yourself, to demand honesty, and to walk away from relationships that harm you. The people who truly care about your well-being will support your efforts to create healthy boundaries, even when it's inconvenient for them. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to refuse to enable their destructive behavior by imposing real consequences. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to build a new life with people who see your true value. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being? How did you handle a situation where people you trusted betrayed that trust? Share your experiences in the comments below, and let's support each other in building healthier relationships. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others find it. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming betrayal and building authentic relationships. And share this with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve better treatment from the people in their lives. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to treat yourself. You deserve honesty, respect, and genuine care in all your relationships. Stay strong, stay hopeful, and never stop fighting for the life you deserve.